transformed the opinions of our citizens and shaped our collective memory. Here, we don't just narrate the past. We analyze and focus on the events that live on in the mind of America. A journey to the heart of the facts that defined us.
It's really a pleasure to be here for this one. This is a heavy topic for sure, but a necessary one to talk about.
It absolutely is. Today, we are heading down a road that I think a lot of us remember seeing on the news, especially if you were around in the early 90s. But looking back, I realized I had the images burned in my mind, but I didn't actually grasp the full mechanics of what was happening.
Oh, for sure.
We are transporting ourselves back to April 19th, 1993.
A date that is just etched into the American consciousness. It really divides the timeline of federal law enforcement into a before and an after.
So let's set the scene for you. We are outside Waco, Texas. It's this flat, rolling prairie landscape. It's, usually quiet, the kind of place where the wind is the loudest thing you hear.
Right.
But on this specific morning, that landscape is interrupted by heavy armor. We're talking about military-grade engineering vehicles, tanks with demolition booms. There is tear gas hanging in the air like a fog.
And then the fire.
And then suddenly, a massive inferno just consumes this wooden compound.
It was an image that was broadcast live around the world. I remember people watching it in break rooms, in bars, in their living rooms. It was like the first true 24-hour news cycle tragedy.
Exactly. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just some random fire. It was the tragic culmination of a 51-day standoff that had the entire world holding its breath. By the time the smoke cleared on that windy Texas afternoon, over 80 people were dead.
Including more than 20 children. It was a catastrophe of the highest order.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear, but it's also complex. We need to unpack this properly.
Right.
We need to understand how a religious study group, people who started out just wanting to understand the Bible, how they evolved into what the government considered an armed fortress.
Right. And who was David Koresh, really?
Yeah, who was he? Was he a madman, a charismatic leader, a criminal, or some combination of all three?
And perhaps most importantly, we need to analyze the series of miscalculations on both sides. We need to look at the tactical decisions, the psychological pressure, the communication failures that led to a tragedy that, fundamentally changed law enforcement protocols and fueled anti-government sentiment in a way that we are still dealing with today.
And just a quick note before we dive in. We are looking at the facts here, impartially. We want to know what happened inside that compound and what was happening outside on the perimeter.
Yeah.
We aren't here to take sides. We are here to understand the history.
Precisely. To understand the fire, you have to understand the spark. And to find that spark, you have to go back way, way before 1993. Most people think this story starts with David Koresh, but he was actually late to the party.
Right. Because I think most people hear Waco and they think David Koresh is the founder. But he didn't start this group, did he?
No, not at all. If we want to trace the roots of this rebellion, we have to dial the clock back to the 1930s. The group that would eventually become known as the Branch Davidians actually has its origins in a man named Victor Houteff.
Victor Houteff. Okay, let's unpack this. Who was he?
Houteff was a Bulgarian immigrant who had joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, to understand him, you have to understand that the Adventists are already a group focused on the Second Coming. But in 1929, Houteff started claiming he had a new message for the church.
A new revelation.
A new revelation. He wrote a book called The Shepherd's Rod. And essentially, he believed the church had become lax, worldly, and it needed purification to prepare for the return of Christ.
So he was a reformer in his own mind.
In his eyes, yes. But you know how institutions react to people who say, you're doing it wrong? The mainstream Seventh-day Adventist leadership didn't see him as a reformer. They saw him as a troublemaker. They rejected his views, and in 1930, Houteff and his followers were, for all intents and purposes, pushed out.
And they formed their own group.
They formed their own group, the Shepherd's Rod. And here is the crucial geographical connection. In 1935, they moved to a spot just outside Waco, Texas.
Why Waco? Was there something specific about Texas or that location?
Well, it was isolated, land was affordable, and it allowed them to build a community away from the prying eyes of the main church leadership. They named their settlement the Mount Carmel Center.
Mount Carmel, that's a biblical reference, right? A pretty significant one.
Oh, it's a very aggressive reference, actually. In the Bible, Mount Carmel is where the prophet Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal. It was a showdown.
The true God versus the false gods.
Exactly. By naming their home Mount Carmel, they were setting the tone that they were a center of spiritual warfare from the very beginning.
So Victor Houteff leads them for a while, but he dies in 1955. And this is where things usually get messy in these types of groups, right? The power vacuum.
It is almost a textbook progression for apocalyptic groups. When the charismatic founder dies, there is a crisis. In this case, Houghton's wife, Florence Houghton, took over, and she did something very risky for a prophet.
Oh, no.
She put a specific date on the calendar.
Oh, never put a date on the calendar. That's rule number 1 of prophecy.
It really should be. She predicted the apocalypse. The fulfillment of prophecies would occur on April 2010, 1959. She gathered hundreds of faithful followers at Mount Carmel. They sold their possessions. They were ready for the end.
And spoiler alert, the world didn't end in 1959.
It did not. And this leads to a fascinating psychological phenomenon. When a prophecy fails so publicly, the group doesn't always just dissolve, it fractures.
Right. Some people double down.
They do. It's called the Great Disappointment. And out of this fracture, a man named Benjamin Roden emerged. He said, look, Florence was wrong, but the mission is still right. He formed a new offshoot called the Branch Davidians. The name comes from a biblical reference in Zechariah to the branch.
Okay, so now we have the Branch Davidians. Benjamin Roden runs the show until he dies, and then his wife, Lois Roden, takes charge. It really seems like a family business at this point.
It was. But this is where the story starts to veer toward the violent power struggle that gave us David Koresh. In the 1980s, Lois Roden is leading, but her son, George Roden, wants control. He feels it's his birthright. And then, a young man named Vernon Wayne Howell enters the picture.
Vernon Wayne Howell, who we will later know as David Koresh.
Okay.
But at this point, he's just a young guy joining the group, and things between him and George Roden got, well, incredibly weird. I'm reading the notes here about a resurrection contest.
Yeah.
It sounds like something out of a movie.
It is one of the more bizarre chapters in American religious history, and that's saying something. George Roden, trying to assert his spiritual dominance over this charismatic newcomer, Vernon Howell, essentially challenged him to a contest to see who could raise the dead.
Wait, literally?
Yeah.
Like, go to a graveyard and...
Literally. George Roden actually went so far as to exhume a corpse from a cemetery, a body of a woman who had died years prior, and brought it to the chapel. He challenged Vernon Howell to raise her from the dead.
That is absolutely wild. He dug up a body to win an argument? That's got to be illegal.
Oh, it is definitely illegal, and Vernon Howell knew that. He didn't participate in the resurrection attempt. Instead, he went to the police. But when the local authorities didn't act fast enough for his liking, I mean, you have to remember this was a remote area, Howell decided to take matters into his own hands.
Take matters into his own hands usually implies violence in this story.
It does. In 1987, Vernon Howell and a group of his followers dressed in camouflage and raided the Mount Carmel Center. They were heavily armed. Their stated goal was to get photo evidence of the corpse to prove George Roden was abusing a body.
So you have a tactical raid on a religious compound in 1987. This is a prelude to what was coming later, really. A mirror image.
In a way, it was a dress rehearsal. A massive gunfight broke out between Howell's group and George Roden. Roden was wounded in the chest.
And surely, after a shootout like that, they all go to prison.
You would think so. Vernon Howell was tried for attempted murder, but, and this is key to his rising mystique, the jury was hung. They couldn't agree on a verdict for him. His followers were found not guilty.
How does a jury acquit someone who raided a compound with guns? I don't get that.
Well, Howell's defense was that they were trying to expose a crime, the corpse abuse. And honestly, George Roden was so unlikable and erratic on the stand that the jury sympathized with Howell. After the trial, Howell even invited the prosecutors out for ice cream.
You can't make this up. He shoots a guy, gets off, and then buys ice cream for the people who tried to convict him.
It speaks to his charisma. But more importantly, it taught him a dangerous lesson. He didn't win the group through the courts. He won them because they believed he had the favor of God. He had faced the legal system, Babylon, and walked away.
And with George Roden eventually out of the picture.
Right, he ended up in a mental institution after a separate murder. Vernon Howell took full control of Mount Carmel.
So let's focus on Vernon Howell for a second. Before he became the sinful Messiah, who was he? Because he doesn't fit the profile of a mastermind genius in the academic sense.
No, he doesn't, not at all. He was born in Houston to a single teenage mother. His background is quite tragic, actually. He was dyslexic and struggled immensely in school, eventually dropping out. He described his childhood as lonely and claimed to have been abused by a group of older boys when he was 8.
But despite the dyslexia, he had this, savant-like ability with the Bible, right?
Yes. This is the paradox of Vernon Howell. He couldn't read a textbook, but by age 11, he had supposedly memorized the entire New Testament. He could recite scripture for hours without notes.
Wow.
He was also an aspiring rock musician. He played guitar, he wrote songs. He had this duality, the poor student who was a scripture genius, the holy man who wanted to be a rock star.
And then comes the transformation. In 1990, he legally changes his name. He stops being Vernon Howell and becomes David Koresh. And this wasn't just a stage name, this meant something deep.
Oh, it was a theological manifesto compressed into a name. David connected him to the biblical king David, implying a royal messianic lineage. It suggested he was a king in waiting. And Koresh, that is the Hebrew form of Cyrus.
Cyrus the Great, the Persian king. I'm not seeing the connection there.
Well, Cyrus is unique in the Bible because he is the only Gentile, a non-Jew, referred to as a Messiah or anointed one.
Why?
Because he marched into Babylon and liberated the Jews. By taking this name, Koresh was declaring himself a warrior Messiah who would destroy the modern Babylon.
And for him, Babylon wasn't ancient Iraq, it was the U.S. government.
Correct. He taught that the U.S. system, the federal government, the police, were the corrupt Babylon of Revelation. This brings us to his theology of the seven seals. This is crucial because it's the glue that held his followers to him.
Let's break down the seven seals. I think a lot of people hear that phrase and just think end of the world, but what does it actually mean in their theology?
Think of the seven seals as a cosmic combination lock, or a title deed to the earth. In the book of Revelation, there is a scroll sealed with 7 wax seals. As each one is broken, a specific catastrophe hits the earth: famine, war, death. But the Bible says no one in heaven or earth is worthy to open the scroll except the Lamb.
Then Koresh claimed to be the Lamb.
Exactly. He told his followers, I am the only being in the universe authorized to break that wax. This gave him absolute leverage. If you believe he holds the keys to salvation and the apocalypse, you do what he says. It turns spiritual longing into a hostage situation. Without his decoding of the scripture, your soul is lost.
And what he said, what he demanded, got very dark very fast. We have to talk about the New Light doctrine.
This is where the group moved from a standard millenarian sect to something much more abusive. In 1989, Koresh unveiled his New Light revelation. He taught that all marriages within the group were dissolved.
Dissolved.
Yes. He claimed that all women belonged to him as spiritual wives.
So he looked at the married men in his group and said, your wife is now my wife.
Yes. And he separated the men into different quarters. He claimed he needed to father 24 children to rule the world during the millennium. This wasn't just about consenting adults, though. He took wives who were underage girls, some as young as 12 and 14 years old. He justified the statutory rape using twisted interpretations of the Song of Solomon and the Psalms.
It's disturbing.
Yeah.
He dismantled families, took the wives and daughters for himself, and the men, they just had to accept it. Why did they stay?
That is the hardest part for outsiders to grasp. They stayed because they believed the New Light was a test of their faith. To surrender their wives and their daughters to the Lamb was the ultimate sacrifice, like Abraham sacrificing Isaac. It was a test of loyalty to God through Koresh.
And this abuse, specifically the reports of child abuse, is what started to draw the attention of the authorities. But it wasn't just the abuse, it was the hardware.
The road to the raid, as we might call it, was paved with weaponry. By the early 90s, the Mount Carmel Center was effectively becoming a fortress. They were stockpiling. Koresh spent over $250,000 on arms and ammunition.
That is a massive amount of money in 1992. And they weren't just buying hunting rifles, were they?
No, they were buying semi-automatic weapons, AK-47 parts, AR-15 lower receivers. Now, owning guns in Texas is legal. Owning a lot of guns is legal. But the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, started looking closer.
What were they looking for specifically? What was the red flag?
They were looking for manufacturing intent. See, there is a mechanical difference between a semi-automatic rifle, one trigger pull, one bullet, and a fully automatic machine gun. The ATF received intelligence that the Davidians were buying parts like drop-in auto sears.
What is a drop-in auto sear?
It's a tiny piece of metal. But legally, it's the difference between a hobbyist and a felon. If you install it, it allows the weapon to fire continuously. The ATF suspected the Davidians were using a milling machine in the compound to modify legal weapons into illegal machine guns.
And the tip-off came from a pretty mundane source, right? It wasn't some deep cover operation.
No, it was a UPS driver. It's almost always something small. A driver who had been delivering packages to the compound became suspicious. One package broke open. It was labeled as musical instruments or supplies, but inside, he saw hand grenades.
Hand grenades, like live grenades.
Actually, they were inert grenade empty shells, but they were also buying black powder and fuses separately. If you put those three things together, you have live grenades. The driver reported it. This tip-off led the ATF to open an investigation in June of 1992.
So you have the weapons charges and you have the rumors of child abuse swirling around. The pressure is building.
And inside the compound, this pressure just confirmed Koresh's prophecy. He told his followers that Babylon was coming to kill them. The federal agents weren't just police officers doing a job. In their minds, they were demonic entities fulfilling a scriptural destiny.
Which brings us to February 28th, 1993, the day everything exploded. The ATF decides to serve a search warrant and an arrest warrant for David Koresh, but they don't just knock on the door.
No, they planned a massive raid. It was codenamed Operation Trojan Horse. They had a convoy of cattle trailers, literally trailers used for transporting livestock, loaded with over 70 agents in full tactical gear.
Why cattle trailers?
They wanted the element of surprise. They wanted to roll up, jump out, and secure the building before the Davidians could get to their guns.
But Murphy's Law kicked in. They lost the element of surprise before they even arrived. And the way they lost it is, well, it's unbelievable.
It is a twist of terrible irony. A local TV cameraman who had been tipped off by sources that something big was going to happen was out driving on the rural roads trying to find the best vantage point. He got lost. So he pulled over and asked a mail carrier for directions.
Okay. Seems innocent enough.
He asked, "Hey, do you know where the raid is happening?" The mail carrier looked at him and said, "What raid?" The reporter explained that the ATF was coming. Well, that mail carrier happened to be David Koresh's brother-in-law.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
He wasn't. As soon as the reporter drove off, the brother-in-law went straight back to the compound and told Koresh they are coming. Koresh reportedly said, "Neither the ATF nor the National Guard will ever get me." He put his male followers on alert. They broke out the weapons. They took positions in the windows and the tower.
But the ATF commanders,
Yeah.
they knew the surprise was blown, right? They had an undercover agent inside.
Yes, an agent named Robert Rodriguez. He was inside the compound that morning. He excused himself, calling his handlers to say, "Koresh knows. He's agitated. He's praying." Rodriguez advised them to call it off, but the commanders made the fateful decision to proceed. They thought, "We are the federal government. When they see us, they will surrender."
That was a fatal miscalculation. So the cattle trailers pull up. It's 9:45 a.m. on a Sunday.
As the agents jumped out of the trailers shouting, "Police, search warrant!" gunfire erupted immediately.
And there's always been a debate about who shot first. A fierce one.
A fierce debate that will likely never be settled. The ATF claims the Davidians opened fire from the windows as soon as they saw the uniforms. The Davidians claim the ATF shot first at their dogs in the front yard and then at the building. But regardless of who pulled the first trigger, it turned into a war zone instantly.
We're talking about a shootout that lasted nearly 2 hours.
Yeah.
In terms of a gunfight, that is an eternity. Usually these things are over in seconds.
It was intense. The Davidians had the high ground. They were in the tower and on the second floor. They had .50 caliber rifles that could punch through the engine blocks of the ATF vehicles. The agents were pinned down behind the cattle trailers and cars, taking fire from all angles.
And the casualties were immediate.
Tragically, yes. 4 ATF agents were killed. Steve Willis, Robert Williams, Todd McKeehan, and Conway Charles LeBleu. Another 16 agents were wounded. It was the bloodiest day in ATF history.
And inside the compound, what were their losses?
6 Davidians were killed in that initial exchange. Some reports suggest that amidst the chaos, some Davidians might have been hit by friendly fire inside the house because bullets were just flying through walls, ripping through the sheetrock. It was absolute chaos.
And there was another death later that day, right? Even after the shooting stopped.
Yes, Michael Schroeder. He was a Davidian who wasn't at the compound when the raid started. He was at work. When he heard what was happening, he grabbed a gun and tried to hike back in through the brush to be with his leader. He ran into a perimeter team of agents and was shot dead.
So the smoke clears, the ATF pulls back to lick their wounds, and the FBI is called in. The raid failed. Now, the siege begins.
This is the pivot point. The ATF handles firearms enforcement, but the FBI handles hostage situations and long-term sieges. They brought in their hostage rescue team, the HRT, the elite tactical unit, and their negotiators. And this set up a conflict not just between the FBI and the Davidians, but inside the FBI itself.
And this is where we need to take a quick pause. We're about to enter the 51 days of the siege itself, the psychological warfare, the tanks, and the fire.
A period of intense pressure and escalating danger.
Before we get there, we want to remind you that if you are enjoying this deep dive into history, please consider supporting us through the PayPal link found in the description. Your support helps us keep the lights on and the research flowing.
Indeed. We will be right back with the siege.
Okay, we are back. It's early March 1993. The initial gunfight is over. A ceasefire has been established. The FBI has set up a massive perimeter around the Mount Carmel Center. Inside, you have David Koresh, wounded. He was shot in the hip or side during the raid, and dozens of his followers, including women and children. Outside, you have hundreds of federal agents, tanks, and the world's media camped out.
And inside the FBI command post, there was a conflict brewing that was almost as intense as the one outside. You had two distinct philosophies clashing. On one side, you had the negotiators. Their job was to talk, to build trust, to treat this as a hostage situation. They wanted to offer carrots.
And on the other side, the stick.
The tactical commanders, the hostage rescue team, their philosophy was action-reaction. They believed that people like Koresh only respond to pressure. If you make their lives miserable enough, they will surrender.
And looking at the history, it seems the tactical side won a lot of those arguments. We have to talk about the psychological warfare,
Right.
the psyop.
Oh, it was relentless. The FBI cut the power to the compound, they cut the water supply, and then they set up a massive sound system. Huge stadium speakers pointed directly at the building.
And they weren't playing smooth jazz.
No, they blasted noise 24 hours a day to deprive the Davidians of sleep. They played recordings of rabbits being slaughtered, horrific screaming sounds.
Seriously?
Yes. They played Tibetan chants, they played the sound of a dentist drill, and famously, they played Nancy Sinatra's "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'" on a loop.
Imagine that. You are trapped in a house with no electricity, you're using buckets for toilets because the water is cut, you have wounded people, and outside there are giant speakers just screaming at you all night long.
The negotiators were furious about this. They would spend hours on the phone with Koresh trying to build a rapport, and then the tactical team would turn on the screaming rabbits and undo all that progress. It just solidified the Davidians' belief that the people outside were monsters. It fed the U.S. versus Babylon narrative perfectly.
But Koresh was also playing games, right? He wasn't exactly a straightforward negotiator.
No, he was incredibly frustrating for them. He used the phone lines to preach. He would stay on the line for hours, lecturing the negotiators on the Seven Seals. He was articulate, he was knowledgeable, and he was manipulative. He would promise to come out, then change his mind.
He did make some concessions, though. Some children were released.
Yes. Early on, the negotiators secured the release of 19 children. But they came out without their parents. And when the authorities interviewed these kids, the stories were harrowing. They confirmed the physical discipline, the lack of food, and the sexual abuse. This ratcheted up the urgency for the FBI. They weren't just waiting out a cult, they felt they were leaving children in a house of horrors.
Koresh also tried to play the media. He loved the attention.
Oh, he absolutely did. He demanded that a sermon he recorded be played on national radio. He promised that if they played it, he would surrender.
And they actually did it. They broadcast his sermon.
They did. They gave him his platform. But then, Koresh reneged. He claimed God spoke to him and told him to wait. He said he had to write a commentary on the Seven Seals before he could come out. He called it his manuscript.
This was the breaking point for the FBI commanders, wasn't it? The last straw.
It was. They felt played. They felt that Koresh was just stalling to improve his defenses inside the building. By April, patience in Washington was running out. Attorney General Janet Reno was being briefed on the deteriorating conditions inside, the sewage, the lack of food, the Stockholm Syndrome affecting the children. There were fears of a mass suicide like we saw in Jonestown in 1978.
And that fear drove the decision to end the siege. The plan was approved for April 19. Now, I want to be clear about the plan. It wasn't supposed to be a gun assault, was it?
Correct. The rules of engagement were very specific. Do not fire unless fired upon. The plan was to use CS gas, tear gas, to make the compound uninhabitable. The idea was to inject gas into the building over 48 hours, forcing the mothers to bring their children out to escape the fumes.
So we arrive at day 51, April 19th, 1993. It's a windy morning.
At 5:30 in the morning, the operation began. Combat Engineering Vehicles, CEVs, essentially tanks with boom arms, approached the building. They started specifically targeting the corners of the building, punching holes in the walls, and injecting bottles of liquid CS gas.
Now, CS gas isn't just smoke. Can you explain what it actually does to a person?
It is a chemical irritant. It burns the eyes, the skin, the lungs. It causes uncontrollable coughing and panic. The FBI pumped a massive amount of this into the building. They assumed the Davidians would run out the front door immediately.
But they didn't.
No, they had gas masks. And they likely took shelter in a concrete bunker inside the building, kind of refrigerated storage room, which actually protected them from the gas, but also trapped them deep inside. And they fired back. They shot at the tanks.
So the FBI escalated?
They increased the gas dosage. The tanks moved closer, smashing larger holes in the building to ensure the gas permeated everywhere. They effectively wrecked the structure. Walls were collapsing, staircases were blocked.
And then around noon, the cameras picked it up. Smoke.
The fire, it started in one spot, then another. The building was old wood, dried out by the high prairie winds. It was filled with hay bales used for insulation. It was a tinderbox.
Now, this is the most controversial part of the entire event. Who started the fire?
If you ask the government, the answer is clear. They cite listening devices inside the compound that recorded Davidians discussing spreading fuel. They heard voices saying, "Pour it," and "Light it." They also point to infrared video taken from an aircraft overhead that shows 3 simultaneous ignition points in different parts of the building.
3 fires at once.
3 fires starting at the exact same moment suggests deliberate arson by the sect.
But the critics and the survivors have a different story.
They do. They have argued for years that the tear gas canisters were pyrotechnic, that they could spark a fire. Initially, the FBI denied using pyrotechnic rounds, though years later it was admitted that some potential flammable rounds were used earlier in the day to clear a construction pit, though the FBI maintains they were not used on the building itself at the time the fire started. Critics also suggest the tanks might have knocked over kerosene lanterns or fuel supplies when they smashed through the walls.
Whatever the cause, whether it was suicide or an accident, the result was a nightmare.
It was a death trap. The wind fanned the flames into a firestorm. The fire moved faster than anyone could react. Only 9 people escaped the flames.
And inside.
76 Davidians died.
And Koresh. What happened to him?
David Koresh was found dead with a gunshot wound to the forehead. It is widely believed to have been a mercy killing or suicide committed by his lieutenant, Steve Schneider, who then killed himself.
25 children died in that fire,
including 2 pregnant women. Some of the bodies were found in the bunker, huddled together, buried under the debris of the collapsed building. It was a scene of total devastation. The Mount Carmel Center was reduced to ash in less than an hour.
The immediate aftermath must have been chaotic.
It was a media frenzy and a legal battlefield. 12 surviving Davidians were indicted. Eventually, 8 were convicted on firearms charges and manslaughter. They were all sentenced to prison. But interestingly, the jury acquitted them of the murder of the agents.
Wow.
They found that the Davidians had acted in self-defense during the initial raid because of the excessive force used by the ATF.
That is a huge statement by the jury.
It is. All the survivors have since been released, the last one in 2007.
But the legal consequences were almost overshadowed by the cultural and political consequences. This event didn't just end on April 19. It echoed.
It echoed loudly and violently. For the anti-government militia movement, Waco became a rallying cry. It was seen as proof that the federal government was tyrannical, that they would use tanks and gas against their own citizens. It radicalized a lot of people who felt the government was out of control.
And one young man in particular was watching very, very closely.
Timothy McVeigh. He was a Gulf War veteran. He had actually traveled to Waco during the siege. He was there on the perimeter selling bumper stickers, observing the government's tactics. He was outraged by what he saw. He believed the government murdered those children.
And exactly 2 years later,
on April 19, 1995, the second anniversary of the fire, Timothy McVeigh parked a Ryder truck filled with explosives in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. He detonated it, killing 168 people.
Wow.
When asked why, he explicitly cited Waco and Ruby Ridge as his primary motivations. He chose the date to send a message.
So in a way, the tragedy of Waco birthed the tragedy of Oklahoma City.
It is a dark lineage of violence, action and reaction.
The cultural footprint is huge, too. We've seen the miniseries Waco from 2018. We've seen documentaries like Waco, The Rules of Engagement.
Even music. The metal band Machine Head has a famous song called Davidian with the lyrics, "Let freedom ring with a shotgun blast." It just permeates the culture as a symbol of defiance.
There's even a curious detail about a Mexican film from 1993 called Tragedia in Waco, Texas.
Yes, they rushed that into production so fast to capitalize on the news. They actually changed Koresh's name to Coleman in the movie, presumably to avoid legal trouble or controversy, but it just shows how quickly this became a global story.
So, as we wrap this up, what does this all mean? We have a mix of apocalyptic theology, stockpiled weapons, aggressive tactical decisions, and a fire that consumed everything.
It serves as a grim reminder of what happens when communication breaks down completely. When 2 sides, a government and a sect, stop seeing each other as human and start seeing each other as symbols. To Koresh, the FBI wasn't people, they were Babylon. To the FBI, the Davidians weren't a family, they were a cult and a threat.
And once you dehumanize the other side, any level of force becomes justifiable.
Exactly, and it leaves us with the survivors. Because there are still believers.
That's the part that shocks me. The group didn't disappear?
Remarkably, no. There are still a small number of survivors and new adherents who believe David Koresh was a prophet. They believe the fire was his martyrdom, a necessary step in the prophecy. They are still waiting for the resurrection.
That is just heavy.
It brings us to a provocative thought for our listeners. We live in the age of information now. If a group like the Branch Davidians formed today, with the internet, with social media, would it have ended differently?
That's a terrifying thought. I mean, imagine Koresh live streaming the raid on Instagram or TikTok.
Or thousands of supporters mobilizing on Telegram and descending on the site to block the panks. Would the FBI have been able to act? Or would the echo chamber of the internet make it even more volatile?
It's a question without an easy answer.
Yeah.
When does a religious group become a threat? And how does a free society handle that threat without becoming the very monster the group fears?
Indeed. It is the balance between liberty and security written in fire.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. We hope we helped you understand the complexity of those 51 days. If you value this analysis, please remember you can support us via the PayPal link in the description.
Your support allows us to keep digging into history.
Don't forget to follow the podcast for more deep dives into the events that defined us. Goodbye.